Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming and welcome. Before we begin, I would like to say a few words to those who will be watching the recording of this conversation from inside Russia, to those who continue in whatever remaining ways possible to preserve honesty, dignity, and courage under Putin's regime. We know that it takes strength to do that, and please hold on. We have actually been preparing this event for almost 6 months, though probably many of us heard the news about Maria's visit more recently. And this has been a reminder for me that beautiful things are happening long before we actually fully see them. And sometimes the only thing we can do is that just keep doing what you think is right to do and trust that meaningful moments will come. I also want to sincerely thank the team of the University of Chicago Forum on Free Inquiry and Expression for incredible support and care throughout the entire process. We're also very grateful to the Mali Center and the Center for East European and Russian Eurasian Studies for co-sponsoring tonight's event. Tonight's conversation is also made possible through funding support from the Chicago Forum Zell Speaker and Event Series and the Zell Family Foundation. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Scott Gehlbach.
Can you introduce yourself too? Who are you?
Oh, yeah. My name is Alena Gorbantsova. I'm a second-year PhD political economy student at the University of Chicago. And going back to Scott, Scott is professor at the Department of Political Science, Harris School of Public Policy at the college, whose works has shaped how many of us think about autocratic regimes, political economy, and of course, the contemporary Russia. And of course, our tonight's speaker, Maria Pevchikh, the head of investigations at the Anti-Corruption Foundation and Chairwoman of the Anti-Corruption Foundation and producer of the Academy Award-winning documentary, Navalny, and so much more and more. And it's really a big deal for all of us to have you here with us tonight in Chicago. Thank you all for coming. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Let's begin.
Okay. Okay, thanks so much, Alena, and I want to give a real shout out to Alena, who has worked tirelessly for, as she said, about 6 months to bring Maria to campus. It's a particular pleasure to have Maria with us today. I don't want to spend too much time introducing her. I want us to have time to talk, but for those who maybe are on the periphery of the conversation that we're going to have today, let me just provide a few basic notes. So Maria is the head of investigations at the Anti-Corruption Foundation, which is today based in Vilnius, Lithuania. It's an organization started by Alexei Navalny in 2011. Since 2023, Maria has been chair of the board of the foundation. As chief investigator, I'll say periodically FBK or FBK, the Russian acronym for the Anti-Corruption Foundation. So as chief investigator of the FBK, Maria has led explosive investigations of Russia's corrupt elite, including the revelation of Putin's palace, castle really, on the Black Sea, and exposed the inner workings of Russia's security state, including especially through the foundation's joint investigation with Bellingcat of Navalny's poisoning in August 2020. As Alena said, she's executive producer of the award-winning, Oscar-winning film Navalny. Those of us who have seen the film will have seen Maria already, and there's this sort of indelible image, I think, for anybody who's seen the film of Maria holding her phone, filming Alexei Navalny as he's talking to one of the people who tried to kill him. Since Navalny's murder in a Siberian prison in February 2024, she and the Anti-Corruption Foundation have carried on their work outside of Russia. And for those of you who are sort of aware of the work of this organization only through the news, I encourage you to go to the website of the Anti-Corruption Foundation and just spend an evening watching one of the investigations, one of the videos that are posted on the website. You'll get a real sense of why this organization, why Maria, Alexei Navalny, others have been such an important part of the story of Russia for the past 15 years. So without further ado, let's move to our discussion. I think the plan is for Maria and I to spend maybe 25, 30 minutes in conversation, and then we're going to turn it over to you. And we look forward to your questions as well. And so the first thing that I want to discuss today is the investigations themselves. So the central work of the Anti-Corruption Foundation is the investigations into Russia's elite, the details that they expose, the way that those details are disseminated to the Russian public and other publics through videos posted on YouTube and TikTok and other media. And so I guess the sort of first obvious question would be, it's become, I think, much more difficult for the typical Russian citizen to connect to media where these videos, these investigations are disseminated as Kremlin censorship has increased in recent years. So YouTube is throttled in Russia today. TikTok, as I understand, is essentially in compliance with Russian censorship. Facebook and Instagram are banned. Is this a real constraint in your work? What is it that I don't know, have you had to adapt to be sure that you're still able to publicize your work among the Russian public, to maintain a connection with the Russian public?
Hi.
Hi. Good.
Well, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be here. This is definitely the prettiest room I've ever been into in terms of like events like that. Wow. Yes, I'm going to answer the question in a second.
We should have had you come here earlier so we had time to walk through the museum
I
bit, which
did
is
have a stroll
you
through
did?
a museum.
Oh, good, good. And it's
I-
excellent.
I
right?
wish I had
Yeah.
more time. It
Yeah.
is so impressive. I recommend everybody
Okay.
to have
Yeah.
a little glimpse. So, investigations when the entire world is against you. That's where we exist, and this is our daily reality, but this is not absolutely, by no means, this is the end of the world and the end of Korea. We continue to investigate exactly like we did before. It is very important to understand that the situation fluctuates almost like on a monthly basis. You've just mentioned, Scott, that TikTok is banned and not accessible to to Russians. I would agree with you a couple of months ago, but not today, because actually, quite quietly, without really announcing it, TikTok is back. And the quickest vehicle for us at the moment to deliver our investigation is not YouTube, which is actually slowed down and almost blocked, but TikTok.
And is that because so the Russian government has been trying to exercise, has sort of unsuccessfully in the past tried to shut down Telegram in Russia, and is trying again, as I understand, and there seems to be sort of limited technical bandwidth to be able to do this, and so as they're bringing...
This is a bit of a whack-a-mole situation, just so you understand. So every month something else gets blocked, then every month something else gets either unblocked or there is a way to bypass the regulations and to still access it. You know, the VPNs are being shut down, the new ones emerges. So our job is to constantly monitor everything that is happening and keep an eye on what is trending right now, like where people are getting their information from. Telegram is still mostly there. I'm not too optimistic, but as for today, it's still largely accessible, slowed down, a bit tricky in terms of media. But it's still there. You can still post there. And yeah, as I mentioned, TikTok, weirdly, is the most efficient vehicle for us to deliver information to the Russian audience. And we see that this is Russian audience, about 80 or 85% of our TikTok subscribers are subscribed from Russia and are watching from Russia. And YouTube is, of course, still there. I'm not going to deny it. For years and years and years, I've been embarrassing myself going around similar events saying that YouTube is forever. YouTube, they will never dare to block YouTube.
It's all the parents who depend on it.
Yes. That was literally, that was my line, and I repeated it many, many, many times. I was completely wrong. No, they moved a bit of audience to alternative platforms like Conductor, like VK Video or RooTube. Smaller but still exists, and they have slowed down YouTube quite a bit, and we see significant loss in terms of viewership, sadly, for now, but it doesn't mean we are going to stop using it, right? It's very important if you are not just making investigations, just for the sake of it, but if you're actually involved in political struggle, if you are using those investigations as political tools, it means that they need to be readily accessible almost everywhere. So once the YouTube ban is lifted, or people figure out how to bypass it, or it gets unslowed down and works well again, we need to make sure that everything is there and that the audience doesn't come to like an empty page where nothing is left for them to watch.
Yeah. How many of the people who see your videos do you know are seeking them out, and they go to the, if YouTube isn't working for them, then they go to TikTok. They know where to find you. And how many are just sort of accidental observers? They're on YouTube already for some other reason, and then they happen to see.
Well, YouTube technically is accidental, but at the same time it isn't, because it's all algorithms, right? If you watched a political video longer than couple of minutes, or if, God forbid, you pressed like or have written a comment about it, it is very likely that next time you open YouTube homepage, you will see recommendations that are tailored to your preferences. So we see that most of our traffic comes from recommendations, so comes from the people so is offered to people by YouTube. It is highly unpopular and irregular for people to actually type things in YouTube. This is not how they work. They go through the feed and see what interests them, they click it, and then YouTube offers them similar videos.
Do you have a sense, like trying to compare apples to apples, if you look at similar sorts of investigations today versus 5 years ago, are you maintaining viewership?
Viewership. We lost quite a bit of viewership because of YouTube, and it's no longer possible because of VPNs to even track our users to see where they come from, like which city they are watching from. But we've gained in other places and in other social networks. So our job is to essentially, but so many things have also changed from 5 years ago. Yeah. If you rewind 5 years, that would bring us to 2021 and to a completely different country, completely different environment and everything. And I remind you that's before the war. The environment where. Okay, Navalny is already in prison, but the war is still unimaginable. And there are protests, and it is still possible to have some sort of political expression without going to prison immediately. And this is sadly a very different place where we are at the moment.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So as I understand your investigations, they've always relied upon a certain amount of cooperation from within inside Russia, people who are willing to talk to you, people who are willing to participate in the investigations in one way or another. The consequences, I suppose, for being discovered of doing that sort of thing have probably always been severe, but the environment is more repressive today than it was 5 years ago. The Anti-Corruption Foundation has been declared a terrorist organization. People who have donated money to the foundation have been criminally prosecuted. You yourself have charges that have been pressed against you in absentia. How does that affect your ability to do the investigations that you do?
It doesn't really affect our ability to do investigations. I'm actually going to, maybe it's worth clarifying that even when we were in Russia, we weren't really relying on sources a lot. There are all kinds of journalism, and there are all million sorts of investigative journalists, and the genre that we chose was actually always heavily reliant on data.
Yeah.
I like data, I like documents, I like databases,
You're in
I
good
like
company here
registers.
at the University of Chicago.
And
Yes. Yeah.
I trust those documents rather than sources.
Yeah.
So this is why it is possible that, occasionally we had a source here and there, a source that would send us photographs or videos from inside Putin's palace or inside one of Dmitry Medvedev's residences or floor plans, perhaps, of something big and fancy. But that was about it. We try to not trust words. We rely on something more tangible, something you can see, you can check, and if there is a photograph and you can cross-check it, compare the horizon line to something you see on a satellite imagery, the investigation becomes more reliable. What we lost with our forced exile, of course, is our ability to film stuff in Russia. I think one of the key ingredients, the secret of Alexei Navalny's success was that he, at some point, moved from text, from writing brilliant, very witty and great in every respect blog entries, to making something visual, to making YouTube videos. And when we flew that first drone, well, actually, I'm lying, it wasn't a drone, it was a person with a paraglider and a camera, over somebody, the head of Russian Railways house. And when people got to actually see all the, golden details on this, all these tattoos, all this, palatial sort of lifestyle, this is when things changed. And unfortunately, we lost this ability, so we can't physically film those estates anymore in Russia, but it's fine, there are enough of them in Europe.
You flew a drone over Dmitry Medvedev's
Yes, we did. We flew drones over everything that we were telling stories about, and this is, I think, what changed the game. Because there are not enough words to describe what sort of stuff they are up to, and sometimes what sort of rubbish they built, and how laughable it is, and how hilarious it is, and how just ridiculous in every respect. And when you see it with your very own eyes, this is when it almost becomes real. It's there is this act of reading is very different from the act of actually visualizing something.
It's offensive in a way to see these palatial residences.
Yes, when your pension is $200.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, when your pension is $200 and your president's toilet brush is $800. This is when something starts to click in your head, and you think, okay, well, maybe that's not right. So the math is not working here.
Yeah, good. So it's been 15 years.
Yes.
There have been dozens of investigations, hundreds of millions of views.
250.
350.
250 investigations.
250, yes. Many dozens of investigations. Hundreds of millions of views of those investigations, of the corruption of people in Vladimir Putin's inner circle and of Vladimir Putin himself. Vladimir Putin is still in power.
Yes.
Why?
Well, I mean, it's a very deep and philosophical question, to be honest. Vladimir Putin didn't become a dictator by accident. He didn't just, wake up one day and had a mood, I'm going to become a tyrant and I'm going to terrorize the whole world. Now, 26 years later, now it's been 26 years since he became president. We could see clearly that there was a very much planned, very much prepared sort of operation to establish a dictatorship, an authoritarian regime, let's phrase it this way, straight away. Now, if you look back into late 90s, early 2000s, you realize that the amount of time that happened, that took him to, for example, take control over independent media, to get rid of NTV, the independent channel, or the amount of time that it took him to essentially destroy the upper chamber of Russian parliament, the Council of Russian Federation. This amount of time was so short that it was actually impossible to do that if they weren't prepared in advance. Why I'm saying this? I'm saying this to prove that we are fighting with an enemy that is far richer, stronger, and better prepared than us. And it is very unreasonable, I think, and very, to an extent, I don't know, naive to expect that an investigation or even an opposition politician, a street politician, will change things entirely and win against this monstrous, but not even a person, structure, you know, with this whole KGB and FSB behind him and the secret services and weapons and poisons and everything. It could have happened. It is possible. Sometimes there are examples of this little man winning in history, but it's not guaranteed. And sadly, there isn't a sort of rule that if you do 253 investigations, or you have to do maybe 300 for a regime to collapse. It could have collapsed after the first one. It was shaky after, I don't know, 93rd one, and it might fall one day, and it will be 331st investigations that we do. We are the regimes like Putin's. They collapse abruptly, very quickly, and very unexpectedly, like the Soviet Union did. Like, we don't need to invent things; we saw it. What is the book called? It was forever until it was
until it was no more.
Until it was no more. Yeah. And I think this is very similar. What is going to happen to Russia is going to be, to Putin's Russia, is going to be very similar. We're just going to wake up one day, and the previous years would seem like an unimaginable nightmare, and people would not know how did they put up for such a long time. What's going to trigger it, we don't know. We know that investigations are very likely to do that. We know that investigations build up. We know that with investigations, with journalism, with good journalists, you can help people connect the dots. I don't want to be talking too much, but I could give a specific example that happened just a couple of weeks ago. Those who follow Russian politics know that the biggest protest that we've seen in months, maybe years, was a very recent protest in Siberia, where people have lost their cows and sheep and goats, and essentially all sorts of domestic animals that you have as a farmer. The government explaining nothing, bringing no documents, doing no tests, sent those people, people like, you know, dressed in white, hazard sort of gear, looking very intimidated with some sort of boxes, and these people just killed 50,000 cows in Novosibirsk region. Cows, sheep, goats, camels, like all sorts of cattle that people had at home in order to eat, sell the produce and make money, etc., etc. So there was the protest was insanely big, and it started with just this very sad videos where you see like a little tiny calf or a cow being murdered. I mean, and there's a heartbreaking. But then when the day 3, day 4, those videos change a little bit, and people start to associate what happened with the government. So they don't just cry that they've lost their livelihood, that they've lost the source of their food. They say, but how come the governor or the regional minister of agriculture didn't take care of it? Then another day goes by, they protest against it, and they get beaten up. And then they say, oh, wait, but why is the police not protecting us and our houses? They are doing the opposite. Why are they hurting us? And day by day, people are escalating their protest and starting to connect the dots. And then at some point during this whole process, we released a small investigation about the Minister of Agriculture, a glamorous, wonderful lady. I think the compensation for one cow is, well, no, for a family that owned a cow is like $12,000 or something like that. So this is what you get for an animal, and this is what you get to kind of compensate for the whatever you've lost in terms of like farming business. And her, like, one earring of hers that she wears is worth that. And then we did, entire look into how she, into her wealth, how she lives, how she dresses, that every skirt, every jacket, every watch that she wears is worth like more than the entire Novosibirsk region will ever get in compensations. And people hear that and they use it. And this is how we kind of, we insert little bricks on which, to build this ladder for people from realization that something is wrong to like attributing it to the ministers responsible for it, and ultimately, of course, Putin, the person responsible for everything.
It's connecting the dots.
Yes.
Yeah. Alyona is cracking the whip a little bit up here. So let's keep. I'm going to keep the conversation moving along, so we have time to move to about 5 minutes. Okay, but I do want to ask a couple of additional questions. So just to follow up on this conversation, is changing public. So if the ultimate goal is perhaps to allow people to connect the dots in a way that results in that moment when what seems impossible suddenly seems inevitable and the regime comes tumbling down. If you think about intermediate goals, is it primarily about changing public opinion? Is that the goal of investigations? I mean, I can imagine that also you're interested in perhaps provoking splits among the Kremlin elite in encouraging foreign governments to impose sanctions or seize assets or arrest.
We're also interested in getting some justice.
Yeah.
Because, and that's, that's in terms of foreign government sanctions, etc., because that's something that we've been deprived of for many years. And normally, like if you ask any Russian person in the street, like, oh, what's going to happen after this and that, like after Navalny's investigation about this minister? And they're going to say either nothing or Navalny will get in trouble. Like, that's the logic, and it's almost after a quarter of the century of Putin's regime and the judicial system that he has built, there is absolutely no hope that any justice will be served. So now we look for it abroad, and it actually works. And obviously that is another, like, not long-term, but not short-term either. I'm after some accountability, to be honest, and after some justice, because it's very, I'm genuinely annoyed and very angry at what these people did to my country. I don't understand why they dare to do this, how they managed to get this far. And within my own very limited resources, I try to do whatever I can to make them either stop or, okay, maybe not stop, but regret what they're doing. And the only mechanism that we have available to us, the only legal mechanism, is, of course, cutting them off from their money. Quite luckily for us, these people, Putin's elite, they don't store money in Russia. They just don't. They don't trust their own system, and they understand that everything they own can be taken away like this in seconds, and it happens every day. So they funnel money abroad to their bank accounts in the US previously, Europe, exotic islands belonging to the Caribbean region, Asia somehow. So what we do is that we look for that, and we try to get their assets frozen abroad, so at least they lose access to it. And then eventually, hopefully, they lose ownership of it as well. And this is a huge chunk of our work. And when we stopped being able to film and find this wonderful palaces in Russia, we start to look for them abroad, and we found as many. And we have a lot of success stories that when we, as a very small NGO, managed to arrest billions dollars worth of assets. Putin's yacht alone, Scheherazade, which we found and proved that it's his. It was parked in Italy when the war began, and we managed to convince the Italian government to freeze it, and it's still there.
Sitting there. Still
there. It hasn't been. It hasn't been moved or anything like that. 2 weeks ago, it was a wonderful day. I was going to show you a video of that, but unfortunately we couldn't do it technically. But I'm going to describe you that video. Please use your imagination. So a police, 25 armed men, dressed all black and masks with guns and shields, they storm into a building and they take everything apart. They open doors like this, and then I swear, if we could use it, if we could show it, this is what you would see. And then they open drawers and there's cash, and then they take the. Yeah, and then they open other drawers. There's Rolex, particularly, and then everything gets kind of taken away and put on on a bed and on a table, and then stacks of cash, 500 euros notes, 50 euros, and all of that. And then they go into a garage and there's red Ferrari. And the camera turns and there is Bentley. And then camera turns and there's Range Rover. I mean, wonderful. And on that video, in the right upper corner, there is a ginormous logo of Spanish police.
Yeah.
And what I'm describing was the video from the search on a villa of Nikolai Kolesev. He's the head of the helicopters of Russia. And a year ago, around this time exactly, I was in Palma de Mallorca, where we found, I'm not complaining about it, pretty good, where we were filming 5 villas that we found, on this little tiny island in one neighborhood, which were registered to his children's names. And probably we wouldn't have paid attention to it if those children weren't 3 and 4 years old. So according to document, a 4-year-old, even preschool kind of kid, came to a notary with money, paid 10, 15 million euros for this, and now they are the owners. And we made a video about it. I knocked on their doors, we flew a drone, we were saying, oh, this is awful, this shouldn't be happening, just like any of the 250 investigations. But then we kind of decided to push for it a little bit more, because it's this is the guy produces missiles, he produces helicopters that are killing people on a daily basis in Ukraine. We should push a little bit more. We had a rally in Madrid and quite a few people turned up. We did a lot of press associated with it. And then the Spanish law enforcement opened a criminal case against it. And this is how I got to enjoy this wonderful video. So things like that do happen, and you don't have to be a huge body, huge government sort of office or something to make it happen. It takes 2 people to do this investigation, 1 lawyer to file a good complaint and put all the documents together, and then just some, political willingness of the local authorities to actually go ahead and begin a case.
That's a great outcome. Okay, I want to ask you Q&A, yes, but I want to ask you one more question, if I could. So I think we probably have a lot of folks in the room who are members of the Russian diaspora in Chicago in one way or another. I'm not myself a member of that community, but I know something of it. And I suspect there are a lot of folks who, like you, are they're angry at what these people have done to their country, and who perhaps are wondering what they can do from abroad, from Chicago. I don't know. Is protest, for example, outside of Russia, is it just performative? Is it effective?
It's not.
Yeah.
I've just mentioned the rally in Madrid.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, the Kremlin media were having a blast when we announced that rally in Madrid.
Yeah.
they're just, look at those immigrants. They're going to go to like a resort, to a Spanish resort to protest, like glamorous protests, etc.
But you think it pushed the police to do what
Of
they
course
did?
it did, because not the actual, maybe not the 50 people that were standing there with posters, but it was covered by media.
Yeah.
It was covered by the press, and then the day after, I saw as I opened the Spanish newspaper, and there is my interview, a comment or two from my colleague, and then there are those pictures. The pictures of people holding signs in Spanish, mentioning the name, mentioning the address, showing the picture, etc. So of course it works. So it's, but the trick is that you can't just go and stand with poster, fuck Putin, go away immediately outside of Chicago University.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's fine. I think nothing is going to happen to you, but it's not going to be as effective and as important as actually, trying to build yourself into some existing topic, existing research, existing something, and then kind of joining forces to do that. So I don't have a readily available answer. If you are at the University of Chicago, do this, this, and that. Million things that you can do. Tomorrow, somebody, us or somebody else, find something like a Russian government official's family in Chicago. Go, protest, write to your representative, kick them out. Easy peasy, I've done a billion times. On a different day, it could be something else. We are engaged, for example, with Alona, a PhD student in the University of Chicago. We are working on a weird creature that I came up with, like a half investigation, half academic research. Mm-hmm. So we are working with data, with a leak. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, but when we release it, you will hear about it. So we are working with the massive leak of government data, which we have just because it's our job to monitor these things. But this time we decided to not just, have a look, not just like download and copy it, but actually to analyze it. We ourselves aren't able, we don't have enough knowledge and expertise to analyze data of such scale.
But with the benefit of the University of Chicago.
But with the benefit of the University of Chicago. I'm sorry if I'm ratting you out and you are using some AI memory from, sorry, actually that's nothing, but it's entirely her hobby. So we do that. Mm-hmm. Who knows, maybe it will be just an interesting exercise, or maybe it will be something that will be super useful because it has to, obviously, the topic is very socially relevant and politically relevant. Who knows what it will end up be. And just stay alert, monitor what's happening with the Russian diasporas in your neighborhood. Be ready, but when the day comes, honestly, I swear, people in Spain, when I visited them before, they were saying nothing ever happens, we don't know what to do. And I was saying exactly the same words. When the day comes, please be prepared. And when the day came, I had to convince them that plus 40 degrees is not too hot to protest. So you have to follow the news. You have to stay alert. You have to. Very important. I'm sorry, I sound like a parrot, just repeating myself all the time. But you think when you retweet, comments, post links, etc., this is a waste of time and this is a bit silly and what's the point? All your friends know it anyways. There is a point. There is a point because you help algorithms deliver our content to those people who might have not seen it. Sending a link to your grandma, your classmates from 25 years ago, all of this works. And as stupid as it might feel in the moment of doing that, I promise, I give you my words, that this is the most effective way to spend your 5 minutes. And most importantly, this is really not modest in it. But I have to do that and I have to be transparent. The best way that you can help while being abroad, remote, etc., without immediate access to any sort of political activity is to give money to those people who do this work. Journalists. Infinite amount of good journalists are in exile. Organizations that support political prisoners. Organizations that help everybody who's like involved in the anti-war activity, Anti-Corruption Foundation, political bodies of shapes and forms, feminists, different youth movements. There is plenty to choose, and it is very important to understand that we have been, I'm using us as an example just because I know that part. We've been 100% reliant on funding from Russia, from small crowd-funded donations until 2021. And in one moment, we've lost everything. Not a bit, not like a proportion. So no, we've lost pretty much everything, and we had to rebuild everything from scratch. Same happened to most of big and well-known journalists that you perhaps are watching as well that are covering Russia. $5, $10, $15, doesn't matter. These people like us, we really do need that. So that's also a very, very effective contribution to the political movement in general, and quite honestly, a rather good investment. You donate 100 to Anti-Corruption Foundation. We literally spend it on, I've mentioned going to Spain to film. Like, this is literally where the money goes to. Tickets, I don't know, hotel, printing posters, like buying a drone every now and then because sometimes you lose them, getting a new camera. Like, it's very simple things, but we would really appreciate some support in that respect.
Very good. Okay, let's open it up. We have a microphone in the center of the room. So here are the rules of engagement, okay? So why don't we have sort of up to 3 people at a time lined up behind the microphone. So if you'd like to speak, walk up to the microphone here in the center aisle. I'm going to ask you to restrict yourself to 1 question and make it brief. And then we'll try to move along pretty quickly so we get through a fair number of questions. So, and introduce yourselves, if you could, as you ask your questions.
Yeah. Hello. Nice to see everyone. Nice to see so many people coming. So my name is Yulia Pushkar, and I'm a biophysics professor at Purdue University. So I drove 2 hours.
Thank you.
We hear a very disheartening news that some people get deported from United States, and they go directly to jail in Russia. And I'm wondering what kind of resources you have in connection to help former political activists, maybe even connected with regional offices of Navalny organization, who ended up in the United States after the beginning of the war, and now they're facing immigration courts, and they're facing the danger of deportation, including females with children, etc.
Yes, first of all, thank you for coming and for driving and for doing what you're doing in science. We are, of course, aware of the situation. We hear that this is what's happening and that there were already some dangerous precedents, I think, of somebody being deported to the final destination being Moscow and being arrested there. Our best response for that is that we have like a helpline. We have our legal email that existed for decades, and which we used to use to help people when they were arrested back in Moscow. It's the same email that we shared many times. It's easily accessible. And we get a lot of requests from the US, from those activists and regional and people in the regions who are associated with us, and we prioritize them immediately. Essentially, if there is normally like a backlog and a queue of requests that we get to our lawyers, the US ones, we prioritize and deal immediately. If the person is associated with us in any respect, if he or she worked, that's 1 second sort of letter answer signed by director on the formal paper, we confirm that the person worked. Same applies to volunteering. Same applies to participation in protests that we can verify, that we can give our word to, that this and this happened. But unfortunately, like as an anti-corruption foundation, as a political organization, this is about as much as we can do. Support individual cases, prioritize them, do not drown people in paperwork. You show us, most of the people, they do, like when you donate before 2021, if you donated to Anti-Corruption Foundation, you would get like a little bounce back email, thank you for the donation, etc. So that's enough for us to sign the letter immediately. I understand that there is, I wish I understood the intricacies of the current situation here with ICE and those deportations, but it sounds scary. And it sounds like they are not doing their job properly in terms of taking personal circumstances into account and essentially breaking, I would imagine breaking basic human rights by exposing people to inevitable imprisonment in their home country. And I feel awfully sorry for what's happening. And if we can help in this respect, we always try to do that.
It's just also a question about what American citizens can do. Okay, please.
Здравствуйте, Maria. Hello, Scott. Maria, thanks a lot for everything you do. Scott, hello, and thank you very much for your hospitality. So my name is Vadim Karavayev. I'm president of Anti-Piracy Center. But my question will be today not about movie piracy. So less than a year ago, in October 2025, two people were killed in Dubai. They were a married couple of entrepreneurs. They had met in a very privately rented villa where they were tortured and they killed. In attempt to conceal the crime, the bodies was dismembered and scattered in garbage bins across the city. Two young girls left orphaned. The crime was committed by Russian citizens, former participants of the war, just because they tried to obtain the password to the victims' crypto wallets. More and more Russian soldiers are returning from the war to the country with shattered economy, with no real plans for the future, and often suffering from PTSD. For me, it's a signal to potential threat to the safety of United States citizens, both in our country and in any tourist destination an American may to travel to.
Can I, sorry to interrupt, but can I just ask you to proceed to the question?
Yeah, I'm almost done. So in this regards, my question is both to the Scott and to Maria. Do you consider it's important to create an international initiative to collect data on such individuals and share it with the government of United States and European countries in order to restrict their entry? Thank you.
The question about Russian soldiers, as I understand, who
yes, and to create
Ukraine, who have then committed crimes after.
I don't think there will be issued visas even today by especially if they served in the Ministry of Defense and signed the contracts. I don't think they're eligible to get any sort of visas to travel to Europe and America anyways.
Yeah, but for example, there is no visas between Russia and Turkey. And for example, some German citizen can go to the vacation to the Turkey and can be even killed by some people with PTSD. Because you know the propaganda and how they brainwashed now.
You know, I guess it is possible. It is possible that may happen, like with any person from any war that has PTSD, and there are also loads of psychopaths, etc. I think, obviously, the matter that you raised, that we will have to coexist and live together with these people in Russia, that's the huge and important question. The fact that some of them will occasionally go to Turkey for a beach holiday. Well, that's inevitable, I think, and that's not really possible. It's not really enforceable. You can't really do, Turkey doesn't impose sanctions. Turkey doesn't have visa regime. They welcome Russian tourists of in every shape and form. So I think it's just not feasible to discuss that. And the big and very scary question, the matter that I'm terrified of most, is that what it would be like to live in Russia with more than 1 million men.
Years, yeah.
With 1 million men that returned alive, I don't know, in full or not in full, but still returned and are completely and entirely like traumatized in the worst possible sense and ready to kill and also know how to kill. Yeah. But that's, I guess, the topic for like a separate space.
So for those who don't know, the number of crimes committed in Russia by former service members has been increasing pretty dramatically over the past few years.
It's logical, and the more of them return, when they run out of money, then at some point, because you know that still now most of the people who return because they're wounded, they get loads of money, crazy amounts of money, but at some point they will run out, right? They start drinking, they don't really integrate back into the society. It's all lies that they're being offered jobs and positions, etc. Nobody is. Nobody really wants to work with these people. But again, this is going to be the question of like 21st century for Russia. And I personally haven't even started thinking about that respect. I understand there must be like a body of knowledge that comes from previous wars, from Afghanistan and Vietnam and other places. So there will be a society-wide problem of, you know, recovery. Of the nation.
I think one of the things that we know from your first discipline, from sociology, is that some of those who returned from the war in Afghanistan then became they call them the violent entrepreneurs of the 1990s.
That happened in the 90s. So they post Afghanistan people, they became the core of the Russian gangs, and they were the ones who controlled all the
But it was completely different number of the people, right?
Completely different number, and also Afghanistan was God knows where, very far away, and it was a completely like the nature of that war was different. People were more like, you know, annoyed, and they, you know, it was just a very like incomparable situation and incomparable amount of people. Could they come back and start forming gangs? Yes, they could. But again, we're going to deal with that. It's a separate discipline, yeah.
Great, thank you for your question. Okay, please.
Yeah, well, you know, us expats, we ask questions and then hear the point of it. Anyways, in all seriousness, my name is Igor, and speaking of, you know, how we get involved in our community, I am one of the organizers of Voice of Free Russia Chicago. We do rallies. We work with some other volunteers to send letters to political prisoners. So if anyone here, Russian, non-Russian sort of thing, come see us after the meeting. But since I'm here to ask one question, and one of my questions have already been answered, I am kind of curious, given the environment in the United States and some of their authoritarian aspirations, what can Anti-Corruption Fund teach American journalists and American media about how to cover some of the issues they never had to cover before? And
Good. Thank you. Good. I think I got. Yeah. And folks, if you could, maybe don't stand quite so close to the microphone, because there's a lot of feedback when you're very close. So, you know, give yourself a few inches.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's good. It's just, you know, for future questions. So there's a question about what Americans can learn about investigative journalism, investigations of corruption.
How
the sort of work.
To fly a drone.
Yes.
Over.
Yeah.
It's a big and philosophical question. I think the main, not to go into details of what actually we can teach, like, I don't know, working with this database and that database and what's available, you know, to download on darknet, etc. I'm sure American journalists are perfectly capable of figuring that out themselves. There's a political matter of not getting accustomed to what they are writing about and what is happening. I think the scariest thing and the most, you know, the feedback that we get most after our investigation, if you take like an average Russian, I know it's a non-existent concept, but still, like, let's be simplistic. They will say, oh, everybody knows that, they're all corrupt, this is how Russia works, everybody's thief, etc. So what's the point of writing about this anyways? I'm pretty sure that soon in the US, the feedback will be similar and people will get tired of, they might get tired of the stories about the Trump regime, because there's one after another, they're somewhat similar, and you develop a bit of immunity to it almost. So my advice to those people in the US who are uncovering corruption, uncovering political corruption specifically, is to never get used to it, never think that some story is too small, and that if one story or another is not resonating at the moment, that this is a good reason to stop writing about it and write about something else. It's a scary place where the US is right now at the moment. It kind of resembles, weirdly in some ways, the Russia, the early years of Russia after the Soviet Union collapsed. A bit wild, a bit difficult to imagine, to believe that Trump is actually doing what he's doing. It's all a bit surreal, but just like, I don't know, my only advice is just to grab on to your democracy, to your institutions, to your free press, to everything. Grab onto it and just not let it go. Whatever happens, do not let it go.
Yeah. Good, thank you. Please.
Hi, my name is Igor. I'm a first-year student at the University of Chicago, and the question that concerns me and most of the Ukrainians, that you might know that Ukrainian, or to be precise, Ukrainian army now hosts the most effective Russian opposition force, Russian Volunteer Corps, Русский Добровольческий корпус. In your opinion, what is your stance on Russian Volunteer Corps, and do you see them as potential allies against in the war against Putin's regime? Thank you.
I think in the actual war, they are doing a good thing. They're on the right side of the war, and they're fighting an aggressive regime that has invaded Ukraine. Do I see them as allies? Not really, no, I'll be honest. I have a big problem with the political leadership of the Russian Volunteer Corps, and as much as I can appreciate the input and the sacrifice that some of them are doing, there is an elephant in the room, and this is their extreme neo-Nazi affiliation, which I am largely uncomfortable with, and I will be honest, I never will be comfortable with it.
Okay. Please.
Hello, everyone. I think I can
Yeah, we can
take
hear
this
you.
out. My name is Danil Shulgesterov. I'm from Novosibirsk. I was thinking about the questions, and I have a bunch of questions, but probably I'll stick with one little bigger than the other one very short.
Actually, maybe just one.
Okay, very short. Okay. Yeah, back days in Novosibirsk, we have a campaign which is for a mayor election. I think it's 2019, and then we had a coalition 2020, and we have. And I was thinking about we almost won.
Well, you did win with the coalition. Boyka and 4 other people won
really.
in the regional parliament.
I was on the votes, and I was actually seeing what's happening in the votes, and it was pure. It was good votes, but nobody show up because they've been told they couldn't change something. And then when Alexei Navalny show up, I think it's August in Novosibirsk, then he's been poisoned. And I was thinking about maybe I should go to the FBK office and just have a talk. But then I said, maybe we almost won. He probably will come again. No, it's not gonna happen. My question is, how and I heard this in Navalny live. Navalny, Alexei told, such a stupid propaganda, it's not gonna work probably. Who this propaganda is related for? No one, any reasonable people, society, they don't take it. But now, as we see, this stupid propaganda works very well in such very effective way. My question is, how this stupid propaganda is such effective?
It's time. I'm going to answer. Thank you for your question, and do say hi to Novosibirsk. This is a lovely place. I was there in August 2020, and I celebrated my last birthday in Russia. That was in Novosibirsk in August. The short answer to your question is time. Essentially, just time. 26 years, this is what explains why it works. It wouldn't have worked if it was just 1 year of evil propaganda. It wouldn't have worked if it was 2 years of evil propaganda, because it's just not enough. It's like growing a tree or growing anything, really. You're growing a child. 26 years is enough for what, like 2-3 generations to spend their like formative years in. And there are people who were born after independent TV were gone, like in 2022, in 2002, and I just got paralyzed thinking that what they are 24 years old now, those people who were born after this. So yes, it's this cycle that works this way. Normally, propaganda is dismantled. You believe in it for a short period of time, and then until you hear something that contradicts it, then you change your mind, and situation goes back to normal. It kind of it pushes this way and then goes back in reverse. What happens in Russia is that you didn't hear alternative views. You only heard confirmations of the very same thing over and over again for 26 years. I am strongly inclined to believe that anything can be transmitted for 26 years, and it would be enough for people to believe literally in the most ridiculous, insane, North Korea sort of Orwell sort of style, if you get constant, smart confirmation of this propaganda. Again, all of the channels were slowly and gradually acquired by the Kremlin. So you do have a reflex to change the channel if something like a bit weird is happening, if you don't entirely believe what's happening, right? So you go to a different channel, and normally you would hear an alternative point of view. But exactly the same thing is being said on channel 2, like on channel number 1. Then maybe again, you are inquisitive and curious enough, and you press the button again and you change to channel 4. But it's exactly the same thing, and it reinforces and reinforces and reinforces the message. And then, of course, this what makes it effective: just lack of access to alternative points of view. Internet for years was the only place where you can find it, but from 2014, from Crimea annexation, I'd say that one was mainly gone as well. But don't be upset, because this is good news as well. If you, it also can work backwards. So when the TV is free, and when you do get access to the variety of content.
Would it take, if the regime collapsed tomorrow, would it take 26 years to reverse that?
No, it wouldn't, because even if somebody gave me a title of, I don't know, forever a president and Tsar of everything that has to do with Russia, with ultimate power and immunity from any crime, I still would not force propaganda, like a democratic propaganda on every channel, because I think this is conceptually wrong, and that we cannot do that. We just have to let it be.
I guess my question is, how long does it take people to unlearn these habits of thinking? People who have grown up and know nothing but Vladimir Putin.
I don't know. I have no idea. What I know is that it wouldn't be right to give all the channels to the good oligarchs and tell them to just.
We tried that.
Talk about we talk about how brilliant, smart, and beautiful Yulia Navalny is. And although this is true, we shouldn't be forcing people to do that.
People know that without having to that.
So we have to be very wise and very self-aware to just let things run on its own. I am hopeful that there is some sort of memory. There is something sitting in our code, in our memory from early 2000s, that once we see 4 different sources of information on TV, that people will figure it out. it kind of, we have all the prerequisites for that. The population is highly educated, highly literate, people read, it's like we kind of has all it takes. And hopefully it shouldn't take 26 years. It should take less. The time flies now much quicker than it used to be. So I hopefully, I don't know, 2 terms by the end of the second term of the first democratically elected president. I hope we should be good.
No. Okay. Alona is signaling last question, but no.
Take a present, an artifact from August 2020.
Of course I will. Of course I will. We'll take it after.
Good.
Was it?
Okay. Alona is signaling last question, but let's. We have 6 minutes. How quick can you guys be? Okay.
Let's.
So,
It will be quick.
okay.
So Alexei Navalny was poisoned by Novichok. Then he was killed by another drug.
Yes.
In between of this, he was in Germany and returned to Russia.
Yes.
What was the idea of this? To have people uprising when he landed, or he need to kill himself for the movement? What is your opinion? Because he knew that if it's no uprising, he will be arrested and probably poisoned again. It's like very quick after this first poison.
Okay.
We know that how it's working. Yeah. So did he deliberately choose to go to prison and therefore this way to be head of this movement, or is something else? And by the way, did he talk to you personally and ask your advice what he's supposed to do in this situation?
Okay. Thank you. Is there
No, I can, it's a long story, but I can try to answer it just respectfully. I think Alexei was still at the intensive care unit at Charité after the first poisoning when he said that he's going back to Russia. I don't think anybody asked him. He just said it and kind of announced it. And then he did the very same thing in the first interview when the journalists were allowed to visit him. There was never a dilemma. There was never any decision-making process. He wanted to go home. He had every right to go home. It was unthinkable for him to work and do his political work from abroad in exile. He kept saying that, I promised those people that I will never leave them. How can I leave them now?
But do you think, I'm sorry. Do you think it's paradoxical that you will be poisoned by regime and you just recover it like in Germany and you immediately go back theoretically by poison itself? But okay, I know I
don't think it's paradoxical, no. I know that there are heroes in this world. I know that there are people whose level of bravery is unimaginable and unattainable for us, common people. I know that it was something so much bigger than him that he was willing to take that risk. Did he know he will be killed? Of course he didn't. Did he know he will get imprisoned immediately? No, none of us did. It is very simple now, sitting at the University of Chicago, to say, oh, was obvious. Of course they would have killed him. Of course this was so predictable. It wasn't. I was in the room when all of this was happening. I was there when he was coming back. We were following everything every minute. It was not obvious. And there was also a thing called hope. So maybe that's the simple answer for that. He, Alexei, and all of us, people supporting him and people who dedicated their lives to supporting him and working for him, we hoped that things would work out differently. They didn't, but nobody could have known this back then.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's actually a good place to, no, I'm sorry. I think that's actually a good place to stop. I know we have a couple of people in line for the microphone. We have the room until 6:30, so we're going to have an opportunity to mingle a little bit. I guess I would encourage folks to let our people who have been standing in line for the microphone maybe have the first opportunity to talk to Maria.
Are you sure we can't just
Well,
Answer two
Alona-
questions? Just they
Can
are
we do a
on the
quick-
line. I respect the institution of
Okay,
queuing.
fine, good. Can you guys, how quick, no, I'm sorry, you're not first in line, you're second in line. Oh, no, but you can stay.
But you can ask me questions, that's
stay.
what I said.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll be quick. I'd like to understand whether since you became outlawed inside the country, you got additional targets for your investigations, in particular in the Russian anti-war diaspora. For example, when you had an extensive network, all those regional chapters inside the country, your target was the government, and your most popular investigations were about Medvedev and Putin's palace. But in the last 2 years, your most popular one was the traitors, предатели. And it seems to me that the target became the Russian anti-war, important people in the Russian anti-war diaspora. Even though there's a lot of material about Yeltsin, you criticize Khodorkovsky a lot. Why was it important now? Those events happened back in the 90s. Why did you
Okay,
kind
I
of
get your
have this
question.
target now?
good. And
I get your question.
while you're briefly answering that question, maybe the young man who was standing in line, why don't you go back to the microphone,
Yeah.
okay, and you'll have the...
You had your spot for
Yeah,
the show.
yeah.
We have not stopped our anti-corruption investigations for a second. We have released 12 investigations last year, probably more, maybe 14 or something like that, about Putin, about Sechin and his escort ladies, about regional governors, about ministers of agriculture, minister of everything. Like we've done enough investigations. Writing and making films about 90s and Yeltsin, this is a personal interest of mine. It's an interest very much shared and inspired by Alexei. We spoke a lot about this topic, and this is something hopefully that is how the numbers prove that I'm right. It's a very interesting topic to discuss, and in order to move to the beautiful Russia of the future and build it a bit differently, of course we have to work through and analyze what happened in the past. So God forbid, we never forbid.
This is among your among your most downloaded
Yes,
videos.
it is, because we have,
recent time.
and we will never exist as a political nation unless we process our past trauma. I'm talking about Soviet Union, I'm talking about everything from Gorbachev, Yeltsin to early Putin. We have to look at all of that and try to find the essence of what has gone wrong and why, so we never accidentally step on the same path and never repeat those very unfortunate mistakes that I truly believe were avoidable.
Okay. The last... Okay, great. Last question, please. Yes, introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for your generosity with your time. I'm Griggs. I'm an undergraduate here at the University of Chicago. I'm a public policy major, and I'm wondering, obviously the life of someone who is opposing this regime is not an easy one. It involves, you do not live in Russia anymore. It requires a lot of self-sacrifice. What is it that motivates you to do that? We could say it's the correct thing to do, but is there something or some ones that you do the work that you do for?
That's a good last question.
It is a good last question.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Thank you, everybody, for...
Look, it's like I don't even know where to start, because most of it really doesn't make sense. And the work that we've been doing I'm not talking about investigation, but generally as an opposition movement in an authoritarian regime, it is, technically speaking, irrational. It offers nothing in return apart from risks, poisonings, prosecutions, prison terms. And if you were explain this to a Martian or to somebody completely foreign, they would probably say that you're a bit cuckoo, like really don't do this, this makes no sense. But at the same time, I swear it is impossible not to do it. I think that, how the history and it's essentially like a pendulum. So it takes a lot of people, a lot of smart, brave, and very determined people to shift and to swing that pendulum back in the right direction. So like I'm comparing it to the pendulum because I know there is a way back, and I know that eventually it will go back. This is just the way physics works. But you have to push. We don't know how many people it takes, 10? One, Navalny and his movement weren't enough, sadly. Maybe there will be more movement. Maybe there will be more forces. Maybe there will be, we don't know how long it's going to take, but we are obliged to push because it has to go back to normal for the sake of our future. And it's probably to a foreigner, it really makes absolutely no sense. And it would be much safer and nicer to do films or to be in academia or to do many other things. But somebody has to do this work. And we have invested, as an organization, we have invested already so much into it that it's impossible to do anything else. We've been very lucky and almost blessed with the clear instruction that Alexei has left us. Not many people leave instruction before they die, but in the Navalny documentary, which I encourage everybody to rewatch, it's a brilliant film. In the end, the director behind the scene asks him, "Oh, Alexei, what would you say to the Russian people if you were murdered?" When we were filming it, I was thinking, why are you doing that? Like, this is such a shitty phrase to include in the film. This is so depressive. But now I'm happy he did.
And he asked him to answer in Russian.
And correct. So you passed the test. You definitely pushed the film enough time. And Alexei answers in Russian, like specifically this question. He says, "Please do not give up. You are not allowed to give up." I remember the word to word because I was thinking such weird wording, not allowed to give up. Like why is he putting this way? And this is the clearest instruction of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Yes, there is a huge history of and the huge anger that I experienced because because of what they did to the country where I grew up. I'm angry. I want a revenge, and I want them to pay the price. Of course, there is also someone. Now there is Alexei Navalny who lost and who lost his life for this purpose. How silly would that be, and how stupid to give everything up and to never deliver, this sort of the result that he lost his life for. That would be just wasteful. And most importantly, I think it's possible. I would never sign up for a task which I sincerely thought was impossible. I'm rational like that. I thought it was possible in 2018, 2011 when the protests began. I'll be honest, I hoped it would be quicker. It would take less time. But I still think that this positive change is possible. I think we have all every chance to see and to witness it. I think there will be a day when I will be calling University of Chicago saying, "Pack your bags," economists, sociologists, regime transition specialists, pack your bags.
Specialists in transitional justice.
Yes, pack your bags. You are going to Moscow. Like, see you in Sheremetyevo. I think it is possible. I hope that most of us will get to see it. And we just have to never give up.
Maria Pevchikh, thank you for pushing.
Thank you.